June 25th, 2025. It's Talk of Giants brought to you by SeatGeek. And today I had on Dan Duggan of The Athletic. I reached out to him last week. I believe it was the final day that the media was there at practice. I shot Dan Duggan a DM while I was in the Dominican Republic, while I was in Punta Cana. It's like, hey, Dan, do you want to come on? And hey, it's been a week since minicamp and OTAs have ended, and talk to Dan Duggan. We talked about a lot, as you can see, probably like an hour-long interview. I really wanted to get at, not really like, okay, but how is this guy playing and what does he look like? Because I don't really think that's what the spring is about. And, you know, Duggan and I, we even like kind of really came to that consensus. So what I kind of leaned into is, what are the dynamics like? Like, what are the dynamics like right now between, like, how does the organization view Evan Neal? Is there like investment in there? Because I know I have no investment. How is the organization approaching like Deonte Banks? Is this really a position battle, or is like, I think Deonte Banks just may be the type of player and the type of worker that responds to, hey man, like you ain't too hot, man. Little bit of adversity kind of thrown his way by others. Like, go out and prove it. Whereas a guy like Jalin Hyatt, I don't think he responds to that. I think he responds like with the kill him with kindness approach. So talked a lot about that. Even the dynamics of Jackson Dart, maybe not even necessarily, hey, does Jackson Dart look good, look bad, and what are his numbers, and is he throwing touchdowns and interceptions? But how is Brian Daboll working with Jackson Dart and things like that? So that's really what I did this interview, and that's what I wanted to accomplish, and I had a lot of fun doing it. And thanks to Dan Duggan for coming on. And before I throw it to the interview, we got to talk about SeatGeek. This episode is sponsored by SeatGeek. The MLB is in full swing. The NFL schedule just came out, which means football is around the corner. With SeatGeek, did you know that they're MLB's official ticket marketplace? Your tickets are fully guaranteed and instantly fulfilled in your account after purchase. I may be going to a Vince Gill concert. Not this weekend. When is it? I think it's July 11th in New York City, and I'm going to be using SeatGeek, and I could save 10% off my next set of tickets when I use Giants 2025. Doesn't matter if it's your first purchase or not. Giants 2025, 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code Giants 2025. If you know who Vince Gill is, I appreciate you, because 90s country for life. I'm kind of stuck in the 90s sometimes. So thank you to SeatGeek. Here's Dan Duggan of The Athletic. All right, we want to welcome on to the show Dan Duggan of The Athletic. Dan, when I reached out to you last week for an interview, you said, Justin, it's going to be really cool next week. How about we do it in the parking lot of MetLife with the asphalt? It'll be really nice. It'll be really cool. And I said, no, Dan, we're not doing that. It's 110 degrees in the tri-state area. So we're in a nice AC. I'm in the office. You're at home. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, yeah. Thankfully for the Giants' sake that minicamp is over, because this would this would be a little bit rough for.
Would they still have it? Like, would they like, hey, we're gonna take advantage of this. We're gonna be outside, or do you think they would have pushed it inside? And then would you guys still have access if it was like inside?
Good question. Yeah, I don't know the Daboll regime. Joe Judge, I'm sure he would like hoping for it.
Yeah.
One time they moved indoors. I think it was actually because remember it was like the wildfire smoke. That was the time I can remember like good weather being moved indoors. I don't think it's ever been moved indoors due to heat. You know, even in some of those crazy training camp practices where it's 95 and you're just baking. But this is another beast out there right now.
Yeah, you remember that? Because we're, I'm in New York City, and it's like we're the Empire State Building. If you go outside, like by our kitchen in the John Boy Media office, you could see like, oh, it's the Empire State Building. You like couldn't see the Empire State Building.
Yeah, like, I'm pretty sure they practiced indoor because of that that day. And they might have canceled one even. Yeah.
Yeah. But OTAs minicamp's over. You wrote your spring recap. Before I read it, if I had to bet money on like who or what you would start out with, I'd probably bet a lot of money on Jackson Dart. If I did that, I would have lost, Dan Duggan. You started talking about Abdul Carter. You basically said Abdul Carter appears to be next in that line of instant stars. OBJ, Malik Nabers, Saquon Barkley. Obviously, that's the hope and expectation for him. But what was it about his spring that made you say this, and you let off your spring recap talking about Abdul Carter?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd written a lot about Jackson Dart too, so that partly weighed into it. I was kind of like, I can do a fourth straight Jackson Dart headline, and listen, you can't rate the quarterback and the first round quarterback enough. But I did think, it's a unique situation where we always kind of forget He was the second first round pick. It's easy. It's kind of odd to overlook the number 3 pick in the draft who in any other year, all eyes be on him and all the attention be on him. But when you do draft a quarterback, whatever it was, 22 picks later, the attention kind of shifts, obviously, when's he going to play? How's he look? This and that. And you kind of can take for granted this beast, from Penn State who is just like living in the backfield. Now, listen, all the disclaimers apply. It's spring. They're not in pads, yada, yada, yada. That's why I started my piece that you're referencing, talking about how he moves, though. And again, like you can just tell. I've been around long enough. And someone was like, "Oh, I bet you were saying this about Kayvon, 3, 4 years ago." And it made me actually go back and look it up. And like, no, I wasn't. Like, listen, I wasn't dumping on him. And he, I think I said a quick first step. But he was not like this physical specimen that Carter appears to be. And those 3 names you ticked off were guys that I wasn't actually here for Odell's rookie year, but even just the first time I saw him, obviously he was established, but you could just see he moved differently. Saquon and Nabers, the 2 other guys that really just kind of had that. You're talking about the best of the best in terms of athletes, but there's still guys that kind of operate at a different level. And so far, first impression of Carter. And again, this isn't like it was some blind draw. I mean, you've seen me in college. I mean, that was the scouting report, so it wasn't as if like, oh, I'm shocked by this.
Yeah.
Then you have to go see it on an NFL field. You see him next to Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, and those guys are great athletes. Particularly Burns, I think is a guy who moves, pretty athletically for guys' size. But yeah, Carter just seems to have another gear because it's like so explosive, and that's the word I think I'll probably use a lot about him. And again, it is the spring. But we know these other guys are good players. We know Brian Burns is a really good player. We know Dexter Lawrence is a great player. We know Kayvon Thibodeau is a good player. So you had another guy who could be in that group or even better than some of the people in that group. And that's why when I step back from the spring, it's like, man, if this team is going to surprise, if this team's going to win 9 games, whatever it be, it's going to be because of the pass rush, because it has a chance to just dominate games. I think it's going to dominate bad offensive lines. Now, when you face good offenses, that's when we'll find out. But there will be a game or 2 or 3. I mean, they even had them last year where their defensive line and pass rush overwhelmed bad offensive line. Now, granted, that was only like 2 games, but I think you'll see that maybe a little bit more this year just because you add him. And again, those 4 names I just said, that's a pretty formidable front.
I've spent a lot of time thinking about snap shares and how are these guys going to get on the field. And, the coach's answer that they've basically just given is we're going to put the best 11 on the field at one time. Okay, great. But even thinking about how it's going to shake out stat wise, like who's going to lead the team in sacks. Like what insight did you learn from the spring on kind of what we may see, who we may see on the field at certain times? And then even within that, I think Abdul Carter is the most versatile piece in that. I mean, there was even a coach referencing that Brian Burns has like versatility too. We didn't really see that last year of him like lining up inside or outside. We only saw him line up primarily outside last year, but Carter's obviously the most versatile piece. So in terms of who's on the field, when they're on the field, and where Carter's lining up, what kind of insight did you get from what you saw in the spring?
Right, and I think Shane Bowen used the term like it's a good problem to have. It's kind of a cliche, but it is. You have 3 really good players. How do we get
We don't have good problems, so I'm embracing this.
Like some years the Giants might have 4 good defensive players, period. So if you're having too many in one position, that's fine. The thing I will say is I think a lot of times everyone does assume, oh, you just figure it out. You just get them on the field. It's like, no, they do need to be complementary. That's why I remember last year at this time, after they traded for Burns. Now, listen, Azeez Ojulari certainly was not, a player of the caliber we expect Abdul Carter to be, but still, he was a proven good NFL pass rusher. And it was like, oh, they'll just figure it out. But they never really did, because none of those guys could play inside. None of those guys could really play linebacker. You made that reference to Burns. I mean, I think he had a handful of snaps where he kind of lined up off the ball, and that's just giving a different look. It wasn't something he did, obviously with any regularity. And they never had a NASCAR package. The NASCAR package worked because you could move Justin Tuck inside. And so that's why I think Abdul Carter is such a key piece to this. Because if they just drafted some freakish edge rusher, who's 240 pounds, but can only bend the edge, has no strength, no power, it would probably get a little dicey. And then you'd have all that Kayvon Thibodeau. What are they going to do with him would be more of a pressing concern. Whereas now I think you could see this fitting together. And I think it was Charlie Bolin, the outside linebackers coach, said basically on first and second down, we're just going to be able to rotate, 3 good players. I mean, he didn't say 3. I mean, you could probably throw Chauncey Golston in there too. You're going to be able to rotate bodies to keep them fresh. But then on third down, that's the money down. You're going to want your best pass rushers out there. You're not going to want to rotate them. You're not going to want Kayvon on the bench or Brian Burns on the bench. You're going to want all 3 of them on the field. And that's where Abdul Carter's versatility comes in, because we saw it in the spring. He was everywhere. Now we know at Penn State, he played off ball early in his career. I think you'll see some of that. I mean, you don't want him dropping in coverage a ton, but again, they're going to have so much flexibility here. That's going to be a lot on Shane Bowen to see how he deploys it. But you can have plays where Brian Burns or Abdul Carter can drop in coverage. Like they've done that to some extent. But then I think the biggest thing with him is he can do that Justin Tuck role. He can play the 3-tech. There was a lot of times in the spring where all three of them be on the field. I mean, Dex didn't really do team drills, but let's just plug it instead of Roy Robertson Harris or Elijah Chapman, whatever. He's obviously going to be, in the middle of the D line. You had Burns, say, to the right of him. And then on the other side of the line, you had Carter in a 3-point stance with Thibodeau like as a wide 9. So like you have, the two guys in the middle are Carter and Dexter, obviously two totally different body types, but you think two very disruptive, players. And then the two just traditional edge rushers. I think that's what you're going to see most often because I just think Carter's the only guy who has that. Again, we tried to say it last year. Oh, they can move Burns, they can move Thibodeau, they can move Aziz. They couldn't. That's not, Kayvon doesn't have that body type. Burns, you're wasting him because his whole thing is, explosiveness and athleticism from the outside. But that's what Carter brings. So it'll be interesting. Maybe it doesn't work that well, and you say, all right, and in the next year, all right, we're going to move off Kayvon because we want Abdul Carter to get 90% of his snaps rushing off the edge. And then the obvious parallel with the Penn State background is Micah Parsons. We saw how much he did that, particularly early in his career, moving all around. I think that's the plan for Carter. I haven't checked the PFF snap share. I think Parsons has gone a little more to the edge, but we've seen in Giants.
Yeah, 100%.
When they have weak guards, they're not afraid to use him on stunts or just line him up on the guards. And so that's what, Carter's going to give you that for his entire career, most likely. But for the pieces they have right now, I think he's probably going to start out playing a little more interior on those third downs just so you can get your best 11 on the field. And that's why I think it's key that you have a guy not only as talented as him, but versatile to make all the pieces fit together.
I should say this about Parsons, where I would say early on, like what they did, and this is kind of also what I hope they do too. I mean, Abdul Carter does have more experience as a football player, at least in college, as an off-ball linebacker than he does an edge rusher. So I think Parsons, it was kind of similar too, where they put him as like the interior off-ball linebacker, and then since then they've acclimated him to edge. But they have continued. It's frustrating as hell when you're playing the Cowboys and it's like, I want to see Andrew Thomas versus Micah Parsons. And then it's like, nope, you're going on Mark Lewinsky because you're going to kick his ass. And it's like, damn, that's smart, but it's also frustrating. So I'm hoping they do the same thing there. Last thing on Carter, I have a shit ton I want to ask you. Last thing on Carter, though, because again, I'm thinking about like snap shares and snaps. Like if everyone's healthy, great. Then, there's about 1,000 snaps in a give or take in a defensive season, maybe even 1,100. Burns got in 17 games, he got over 800, which I still think he's paid like the guy that's going to, he should be on the field the most. Dex at being, 340 pounds isn't going to be on the field that much. So out of all those guys, he's going to be on the field the most. But from this spring and how often Carter was on the field and where they were lining up in certain packages, if he's getting like 80% of the snaps, which that's what Burns got last year, 80%, around 800 snaps, are you shocked if Carter ends his rookie year and we're looking at like 75 to 80% of the defensive snaps he's on the field, even with 3 edge rushers that could be on the field at one time?
Yeah, and that's the question that is hard to get a handle on because they rotate so much in the spring and, obviously it's going to be game plan specific things. And when you see how he does against the run, I think there's one area that you're not going to see it all in the spring. And not that it was a major question mark, but I don't think he came into the league and everyone's saying, oh, he's just as good against the run as the pass. Like he's a pass rusher first and foremost. I mean, I think he's got the tools to be a good run defender, but we don't know if he's not, super interested in that or if he's, not disciplined there, whatever it may be. Maybe he doesn't see as many snaps on first and second down. Again, he'll still be in the mix, but maybe that's not going to be a predominant role for him. So it's a little hard to project that. I mean, I will say, to your point, I think Burns is, he's going to probably play a little less snaps. Let's say he was 80% last year. Again, I'm just kind of throwing these numbers off the top of my head. Maybe he comes back to 75. He's not going to go to like 50. I think the guy, if someone's going to get their playing time eaten into a little bit, would be Thibodeau. Because if you're going to rotate on first and second down, I don't think it would just be like a 3-man rotation where, all right, this series, Carter's out on first and second down. The next series is Burns. Next series is Thibodeau. I would think Thibodeau would be the guy who would take a little bit more of a step back. But let's just say that means he and Carter both play 60. And again, I'm not doing the math here as we go, but I think those two guys maybe have more of a rotation and Burns, is still kind of the workhorse. But yeah, it's still a lot to be seen. And I think probably the bigger stat will be on passing downs, on third downs. All those guys should be like 90%. How do you figure out first and second down? You got to get the third down, of course. But I think you're going to see those guys on the field a ton, when it's time to rush the passer.
Yeah. I think playing the run, you mentioned that's a key part. I mean, there's Chauncey Golston, too, who I think is the strongest run defender they probably have. You're going to have Burns and Tibbs that hunt for the tackles for loss, but down in, down out, I think Golston's probably the more consistent one. One of the darlings of spring is Evan Neal at left guard, and only left guard this spring. It's interesting because if there's an opening on the interior, you would maybe think it would be right guard with Greg Van Roten. Now, makes sense to put him at left guard. When he was at college, freshman in Alabama, he was on the left side, so it makes sense to get him there acclimated right now. Could you see Neal, we're fully kind of getting more acclimated to guard, could you see them sliding around the interior, left guard, right guard? And also, even more than that, do you think there are members of the organization that kind of still have hope that their former top 10 pick has a chance to contribute in some sort of positive way, or are we just buying time until he's going to be a free agent next year?
Yeah, so there's a few parts to that. So he was the tough part about OTAs is we're only there 1 out of every 3 practices. So you see once a week, you don't know what's going on the other 2 days. But he was exclusively at left guard up until minicamp. And then I think it was maybe the last minicamp practice or just both minicamp practices. He did mix in at right guard a little bit. And Carmen Basillo, who explained, and it makes sense, as you said, his background is at left guard. So if you're going to make this big transition, let's do in small pieces here. So go back to the spot you've played in the past. But listen, if he's not going to be a starter, you kind of need to be able to back up both spots. I mean, obviously, there could be a situation where if the right guard gets hurt and you move John Runyon there, whatever. But you're going to need to get reps at both spots. But I think it made sense to maybe ease the transition a little bit by at least being on the side he's familiar with. But again, if he's not going to be a starter, you kind of can't be I'm only a backup left guard. That's hard to really carry you on a roster. So I think they will give him a legitimate chance to win a starting job. And to your last point there, yes. I mean, listen, it would be against human nature if Joe Shane isn't holding out hope that somehow this guy he picked number 7, who looks like a complete bust through 3 years, suddenly, has that Mekhi Becton type season, but for him, without having to cut ties and have him go do it somewhere else. Of course, I think that's the hope. And when you look at the way this line is structured, I think, they went for Will Fries and free agency didn't get him. So then once you brought Greg Van Roten back, it's okay, we have a baseline level of competency, but I don't think this offensive line is a strength by any stretch. I mean, obviously so much relies on Andrew Thomas, but Jermaine Luminaire, I think he's a solid player. I think he gets a little overrated because fans like him, but he's fine. You can get by with him at right tackle. And I'd say at best, that's what you say for the interior guys. None of those guys is, ever going to probably sniff a Pro Bowl. Certainly, Greg Van Roten is on the twilight of his career. So I think you bring him back. Okay, we have a guy who, played every snap, can get us through a season at right guard. Do we really want? Is there much upside there? No, of course not. But so that's where you have Evan Neal. I think I could see parallels to the Darius Slayton, Jalin Hyatt thing. Now, different players, slightly different dynamic, but I think they wanted Jalin Hyatt to win the wide receiver 2 job last summer.
Oh, they begged him. They
gave him every opportunity to do so, but they also had the ace in the hole. They knew Darius Slayton, you could put him out there and he'll get you 700 yards and he'll be a serviceable NFL receiver. And then, of course, they just kept giving Hyatt the chances and finally pulled the plug on the experiment and they rolled with Slayton. I could see that happening this summer where they give Evan Neal a bunch of reps. Oh, we're just managing Greg Van Roten's workload. But then if he looks good, hey, let's roll with him. And we have Van Roten he'd be a great backup at this stage of his career because he can back up 3 interior positions. So I think that's the ideal way it could play out. I'm just not ready to buy into any Evan Neal hype. I mean, there's nothing you can buy into in the spring. Again, the whole no contact thing. I think it's even harder to judge offensive linemen because they're at such a disadvantage. Abdul Carter, I mean, to measure what I said earlier, I mean, he's literally just sprinting to the quarterback, but there's no, there's no threat of a run. There's no nothing there. So it's really unfair to judge offensive linemen, positively or negatively, but I just can't get there with Evan Neal. Maybe, but I think the limitations the head of tackle, they might be mitigated a little bit. They're still there. He still doesn't move well. I mean, I think someone said this spring, we're not going to, Brandon Brown, he's we're not going to have him out pulling and stuff and in space. That's kind of an important thing for a guard. You think he just can't pull that seems to be a little bit of a limitation or a tip to the defense. We're not going to get a lot of that when he's, at right guard. So I think they're going to give him every chance. I guess I'd be pleasantly surprised if he proves me wrong. I can't get there with him because I've seen the guy for 3 years and it seems like every offseason, this is the year it's going to click. And now he's going to have to prove it to me before I buy into it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have no emotional investment. And I'm even willing to bet the Giants may be in a similar way. That's why I tried to LA. Hey, is there, I'm sure there's are there people pulling for him in the organization like, oh, I see something outside of, oh, he's just a former top 10 pick that we're hoping turns around, and there's a little bit of a track record in the NFL now of tackles being moved to guard, and we're hoping that he follows that pattern. So, yeah,
I think
we'll
it's
see.
more than that. It'd be found money if he develops. I don't think anyone's like pinning their hopes like, no, he's really going to. Because, I mean, if they really thought that he was going to potentially be a stud guard, they would have made this move sooner. This feels kind of like a last gasp. You know, like I said, it's last year of his deal. Hey, if it works out, great. If not, you know, you figure he's going to go, you know, get a fresh start somewhere else next year. It's kind of obviously now or never for him. And there's just a lot of evidence in the never category to this point.
Yeah, I do wish that they kind of did it last year. I don't know what we were doing last spring with, Luminor's going to be the guard. Yeah, I don't know what we were doing with that. Do you think there's anything else going on with Malik Nabers' toe?
The word I would use for it that just stuck in my head is just, it's been curious. Like the way this entire thing has been handled is curious. Now, it very well may be no more deep or no conspiracy. It may just be he's a star player. They're babying him. He came in, said, oh, my toe is bothering me. They're like, well, all right, we're not going to overtax you in the spring. You know, go do your rehab, whatever. We don't want this thing to linger. He'll come back July 22nd, whatever it is. He practices, you know, all camp, and it's a totally forgotten story when, you know, it's 1,500 yards in the Pro Bowl. But it's just strange because, you know, Daboll's like, oh, this is something that's, you know, lingered since college. Well, it didn't limit him last spring. It didn't limit him last summer. Now, it did pop off in the injury report in week 17. I mean, I remember last year, like late in the year, he'd always kind of have something like lower body. It'd be questionable. He'd be limited, and then he'd play. And then, I mean, the Week 17 game was the Colts game, so obviously it did not.
And he would ball out, yeah.
Yeah, and then he played the finale, which they kind of treated like a scrimmage, and he played that game. And then, like, the one that's hard to kind of rectify is then he went to the Pro Bowl as an injury replacement. He easily could have turned that down and said, oh, you know, I got this toe injury. He went, and again, I know it's the Pro Bowl, but he's still, like, playing flag football. He's still running around. If your toe is bothering him, you might have skipped that. And then all of a sudden, 3 months later, he can't get on the practice field at all for the whole spring. That is a little strange. But again, Daboll is very, I would say, relaxed in his workload with certain players. You know, again, like Dex is coming back from the elbow. But I think that's healed. Another guy who's at the Pro Bowl doing tug of war. He didn't take a team rep all spring. You know, other guys like Andrew Thomas, I think he's genuinely still in the rehab phase. But yeah, I think that there could just be a little situation of like we'll give a wink and a nod, like give you a little spring off. But it's a little bit of a gamble if that's what they're doing. Only again, he's super talented, but you get all new quarterbacks. Like there has to be some benefit to being out on the field, running routes, and not only just with Russell Wilson. Like there's a chance you got all these national people all of a sudden saying Jackson Dart's gonna be starting by week 7. I saw Daniel Jeremiah say I would take the over on that, but nonetheless, that's another quarterback that would be especially important to get these offseason reps with, because assuming, you know, once the season starts, obviously it's going to be Russell with the ones until Jackson Dart takes over. So yeah, I don't think it's ideal that he missed all this time, but listen, if it's just as simple as what's on the surface, toe was kind of bothering him, training staff said, well, let's not overtax him. What I think will be telling is what his workload is like once we get to training camp. Is it going to be a situation where they're managing it, he's taking days off, and they're not playing in preseason games? That would concern me, because that would tell me this toe thing is something that, you know, they're concerned, you know, what it could, you know, it could impact him during the season. It could impact him long term. If he's back out there, you know, going full speed in the camp, you kind of say they gave him the spring off, would be my opinion. So can't really make a definitive statement on that until camp, but certainly nothing Daboll said indicated that it was a concern. So that's why it's just a little curious. When you got a second-year player, basically it seemed like he got the spring off, which, you know, that's one way to go.
Yeah, but I don't trust anything Daboll says. It's one of like, I'm not panicked right now, but it's curious, like you said. But if it turns out that there's more to this, like the tea leaves are forming for it already to be true, that like I honestly, Dan, like it, you know, this is just pessimistic Giants fan in me, because like, vibes are too good right now, energy's too good right now. I could very much see the first day of camp that, you know, fans are there, you're there, everybody's there, and then it's Malik Nabers just on the side, or it's an hour into practice. Yeah. It's an hour into practice, and we're looking for him, and then, you know, he'll come out and he'll join and walk through stuff, kind of like the spring. So, I hope that doesn't happen, but if it's true, and if that does happen, I mean, the tea leaves are already forming, because no surgery, right? No surgery.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's not really rehabbing something. You know, it's more just the way Daboll said is lingered since college, which would have made more sense if he said it last year. But they didn't manage it last year, so that's what I said. Curious is the best word I can say, because I don't have any smoking gun that there's something drastically wrong, or that like he's fine and he's milking something. I don't know. That's why I think training camp will kind of be the litmus test on where that stands.
Now, a position battle and I kind of put that like in air quotes because I don't know if it's an actual position battle, and this is just an opinion. Seems to be like Cordell Flott and Deonte Banks for cornerback 2. Now, I have a theory as to why the Giants are approaching it this way. I think Deonte Banks is the type of player, and there's people, like, as workers, they respond things to differently, right? And I feel like people respond to criticism differently, and I'm gonna ask about Jalin Hyatt. I do not think Jalin Hyatt responds to criticism well. I think Deonte Banks kind of needs sometimes to be told, hey, man, like, pick it the fuck up. Like, let's go, man. So that's kind of why I feel. I think this Cordell Flott and Deonte Banks splitting reps at cornerback 2 in the spring, that's kind of how I view it. Now, Daboll, at least publicly, isn't that type of coach, and I would even say privately he may not be that type of coach, but we know that Jerome Henderson, kind of pushed him in certain ways, and who knows what goes on in meeting rooms and things like that. Cordell Flott and Deonte Banks, CB2. Position battle or not, we'll obviously see more in camp, but what's your take on it just based on the spring?
Yeah, no, I think your theory might have some legs to it because I think Daboll kind of tried, to not go the tough love route last year. He kind of always supported him, always, publicly backed him. And then, you mentioned Jerome Henderson was the one guy who would be kind of losing his mind on the sideline, but he had no teeth because he couldn't bench him because, it wasn't his call. And then finally things came to a head in Pittsburgh where they did bench him. But I think Daboll gave him so much rope and it wasn't rewarded. So maybe he rethought, how do I get through to this guy?
Yeah.
And it was surprising, though, because the first couple of practices we were out there, Banks was the number one, with the starters, not the number one corner. Obviously, that's a Debo now. And that's what you expected. He went from number one corner. They bring a guy in. You would just assume you slot into number 2. And then all of a sudden, you're starting to know Flott getting some reps with the ones. And the first practice, I was like, I think they might have just been like limiting Banks' reps. Because, again, they do a lot of that workload management, especially in the spring. But then it kept happening. And then the thing that was obviously the tip-off was Banks was getting reps with the 2s. So it's not a situation where, Dex just doesn't get any reps. He's not losing his starting job because of that. They're just resting him. If you're resting a guy, you're not going to put him out with the 2s because obviously, it's the same physical taxing on your body. So clearly that's the case. They haven't come out and put a challenge down to Deonte Banks, but I would think it's obvious to him if you come in. Oh, wait, nope. Cordell's going out with the 1s. You sit back, you get out the 2s. And he still worked with the 1s. It wasn't as if it was like he got full on demoted, but it was just, the prototypical, training camp position battle type situation where you're alternating and may the best man win. Now, almost like your question about what the front office and coaching staff would want with Neal, there's no ambiguity. They would want Deonte Banks to seize that job. He's a better physical talent than Cordell Flott. I think he's even been a better player, even though he's been up and down than Cordell Flott. But you at least have, this is the benefit of getting a Debo, and that kind of almost it obviously strengthens your starters, but it also kind of strengthens your bench because now Flott goes to being a backup. So that helps. But Flott at least can play. So if this wake-up call, whatever you want to call it, doesn't get through to Deonte Banks, you can back it up and say, well, no, listen, we'll play this guy because he does everything right. Or, whatever the reasoning would be, and we're not happy with, your commitment level, whatever it may be. But I think the idea would be, we're going to have a position battle, and you and I will be there in training camp and charting who's with the 1s on day 1 and who's on day 2. And then as we get into camp, it probably shifts, and Deonte Banks, hey, he won the job and he did everything we asked. I'm sure that's how they hope it plays out. That's how they probably expect it to play out. I'm sure the deck is almost probably stacked in his favor. But I see nothing wrong with making him earn it because, last year, again, they tried to just kind of support him and coddle him, and it blew up in their face because he did not answer the bell at all. So now I think you challenge him, and hopefully this does get through to him. Again, that's how I expect it to play out. But yeah, sure. Hey, go out and have a good training camp. Don't just have a job handed to you. And then, hey, good situation because you have Cordell Flott kind of backing up, at every corner spot, which is a guy who's, serviceable pro at this stage of his career.
Yeah, I hope that's the main motivation. And I hope kind of like my theory of I think you kind of respond to, you getting told that you're not, hey man, you're not all you think you are, sometimes, and then go out and prove it. That's kind of what I hope because, I don't know, Dan, I'm sure you're on NFL Pro and you're looking at next gen stuff as much as I am, but you look at average separation numbers and it's all right, there's DJ Reed, there's Tyreek Woolen and the best corners in the league, and then there's freaking Deonte Banks, and it's that doesn't look right, but it kind of is. Because the dude just can't make a play on the football. He covers well, but there's more to it in the NFL. Quarterbacks are good. They're putting the ball in spots that they need to get it. Receivers are good too. And he got burnt deep down the field, and then when you have troubles putting the guy on the ground after you allow a catch, and there's effort questions, then it makes it look even worse. So it's there. It's a guy that I just feel like I hope he just puts it together, and he's got to hopefully Paulson Debo can give him some tips on how to make a play on the football. So, the opposite though, because I mentioned Jalin Hyatt. On the opposite end of that spectrum, I feel like I'm living deja vu with Jalin Hyatt this spring. I haven't seen what's been happening. I think his training camp was better than I expected last year. Now, clearly it wasn't to the standard of the Giants felt like he was better than Darius Slayton. I don't think he is as good as Darius Slayton. The one thing that is different, though, is he actually does look bigger. Like when, last year it was the whole, Jalin Hyatt gained 15 pounds. I didn't see it. But this past year I actually do see it, especially that bowling video. It's like, you do look bigger. But there's a clear approach with Jalin Hyatt. Russell Wilson is just killing him with kindness, man. Brian Daboll, kill him with kindness. And like I think Jalin Hyatt is a guy that responds to kind of being treated like kind of with kid gloves. What's your take on Hyatt right now? His role with the organization. Obviously got frustrated last summer when he officially was kind of demoted to the backups, and now he's the darling of the spring once again. So what's your take on him and his role with the team?
Yeah, no, it's kind of like with the Neal thing. It's like the fool me once thing. Like, I've been around too long. I know how everyone in the spring is packed on muscle, best shape of their life. They're locked in. They know the playbook better than ever, whatever it may be. Yeah, listen, I've seen the pictures. I mean, there might have been some lighting there. I don't know. I still remember that time, like Daniel Bellinger's biceps were the biggest story of the offseason, and it made no difference. I mean, like, listen, Jalin Hyatt is someone who certainly could stand to get stronger. I think the play strength is a legitimate weakness of his game. So like when a guy like, let's just say Bellinger is like gets a little bit bigger, that doesn't probably change things drastically, whereas it could for Hyatt. But I don't know. I still have to kind of see it to believe it, because again, with the spring, it's just so hard to make evaluations because it's like basically 7-on-7. It's like flag football. His big problem a lot of times is getting off of jams and getting into his routes. You don't see that in the spring. Debo and those guys aren't up there jamming him up. So let's see what he does in August when that's the case day in and day out. And his body's breaking down a little bit. Like Darius Slayton, who obviously always has the best perspective on everything and is like very candid as a professional athlete. It's like, I love the spring. Like for a wide receiver, your body's not sore, you're running routes, you're catching touchdowns, like it's fun. And again, that's where you'd expect Jalin Hyatt to thrive. Because I mean, when you think back last year, I feel like when he lost his job was right around that Texans game where Jones threw the interception, where Hyatt didn't even fight for the ball. It kind of felt like that was the last straw. And it's like, so that's the type of stuff that like you're not gonna see improvement there necessarily in the spring. And even in spring, like, yes, he had some good catches. I mean, I don't know. He tweaked his hamstring in the first minicamp practice, so didn't really even participate in minicamp. It was kind of a small sample size that everyone's going gaga over. I will say the one thing that if you really want to, just buy into the Jalin Hyatt hype, it's that Russell Wilson is a quarterback. Because if you're going to go through all 32 potential starters, probably can't find a better one for what Jalin Hyatt's specific skill set is and what Russell Wilson's strength is, and that's obviously just launching moonball. So I do not think Jalin Hyatt's going to have a breakout season just based on the depth chart. Who's he playing? He's getting snaps over Malik Nabers. He's getting snaps over Darius Slayton. He had a chance to do that last year. They just paid Darius Slayton $13 million a year, so now he's going to beat him out. I don't see it. So he's still wide receiver 4. Now listen, I think he'll have more than, 8 catches for 62 yards. I mean,
I certainly hope.
He might have a game or two like that this year. I do think it'll be more like the rookie year where like he's in the mix, and the fact that you have a quarterback who will let it go, there'll be a game where he has 3 catches for 105 yards or 2 catches for 78 yards, whatever it was, like that Arizona game. I think they'll see some games like that, but I don't look at like, oh my gosh, he turned into DK Metcalf and watch out Lee, he's going to put up 1,200 yards. I just don't think the opportunity will be there. And I do think some of his shortcomings, I don't know that putting on, a little bit of upper body strength is going to totally flip those on their head. I mean, I think a lot of it with him was just being precise with his routes and timing and feel for the game. Like that stuff isn't improved in the weight room. And those are things that, I followed him from Tennessee, and I remember it's like the pre-draft, every negative thing is like made up and it's anonymous scout just trashing guys. And then when they happen, it's like, oh yeah, wait, everyone said this was going to be a problem for this guy. There's a reason why the guy who scored 5 touchdowns against Alabama was the 70th whatever pick in the 3rd round, because he had limitations to his game. And so getting stronger should help. I just don't think it's enough to like buy into all this spring hype where like, watch out, breakout season coming. Because again, I just don't think there's going to be the opportunities with the depth chart they have at receiver.
Am I thinking too much? Because obviously role will get figured out. What he does well and what he doesn't do well, and his role with Russell Wilson. I think there's obviously, like you said, there's a path there. Jalin Hyatt's very specific skill set of running straight near the sideline. Just so happens to be Russell Wilson's biggest strength of throwing the ball deep on the sideline. So good luck. But do you think I'm thinking too much? You know, because that's kind of like what I've been thinking about this spring. Instead of like, okay, does this guy look good? And you're not really going to learn a lot. But like, I'm trying to think of the dynamics and who these guys are as people and how they respond to as workers. And there's certain guys like Neal, Banks, and Hyatt that I've like really thought about. Am I reaching there with Hyatt? Like, you know, we're really going to encourage you. We really want you to succeed. We're going to give you all the opportunities. And then he kind of like, especially I think back to last summer, and that was kind of taken away from him. And then what did he do? He went up to Joe Shane's office, and even though, you know, may have been a joke, I wasn't too happy about it. So am I reaching too far to be like, this is the organizational approach with Hyatt to like kill him with kindness?
I think that's definitely the approach. Because I mean, you touched on your first question there about Russ. I mean, you know, he can't throw enough flowers at Jalin Hyatt. Every time he talks, it's like, you know, this guy is this untapped star, blah blah blah. But what I come back to is just the opportunity. So like in the spring, he was featured, you know, because Malik Nabers, as we talked about, did take a snap. So there was a ton of first team reps available to Jalin Hyatt. What happens in training camp when, again, we're assuming Malik Nabers is back to a full workload, and it isn't like last year where Darius Slayton was in year 2 of that cheap little deal. Like this is year 1. You made a real commitment to this guy. Are you going to limit his reps again to give Jalin Hyatt a showcase? I don't think so. I think you've kind of made the commitment. Darius Slayton is a better player than Jalin Hyatt. So, I mean, listen, there might be some opportunities because you kind of know what you have with Slayton. But again, new quarterbacks, the reps are valuable for him. It's not Daniel Jones where Darius Slayton could, do it in his sleep with the routes and the timing. He's got to get on the same page with Russell Wilson, with Jameis Winston, with Jackson Dart. So that's where I think it's like, yes, I think this was a very calculated approach to this spring. But I think the rubber always kind of meets the road in the summer. All the words in the spring sound good. Once we're there at training camp, day in and day out, once you get to preseason games where you're going to have, these are the starters. These are the, you're playing in the third quarter of the preseason. That, kind of shows you where you stand on the pecking order, that type of thing. That's when we'll find out what their true feelings are. And I just look at it like, again, I think Hyatt has the potential to have a very good role as the fourth wide receiver, who, again, every third or fourth game makes a big catch or is just a threat because defenses, no matter what, he's on the field, they have to respect his deep speed. But I just can't get there with thinking like this is the start of something. I think it's more like his lane is kind of defined. Is he willing to kind of accept it and thrive in it? Because listen, there are plenty of guys who have made careers as just a deep threat. You can live like that. I'm not holding out hope for anything more than that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, even if he doubles what he did his rookie year,
that'd be great.
Like 46 catches, it would be a lot of yards. It would be a good amount of yards for a wide receiver too, like almost 800. But I mean, he had 16 yards per reception, which, if you're getting a little bit more volume, odds are you're not going to replicate fully that. So now you're basically looking at a Darius Slayton season while Darius Slayton is still on the team, a guy that gets 46 catches, 750 yards. Okay, that's a Giants wide receiver 2 season, or maybe even wide receiver 1, Darius Slayton. But while Darius Slayton's on the team, you're probably not going to do that unless injuries open it up. So, yeah, I'm with you. We've gone 35 minutes, and I'm proud of us. We haven't talked to quarterbacks yet. So, obviously, quarterback rotation, Jackson Dart. I'm not really... we'll see. I'm really excited to see Russell Wilson in training camp and how he leads. So I guess we'll put Russ to the wayside for right now. But you weren't there all that often, but at least, you got a chance to talk to all the position coaches. You got to talk to Daboll, a good amount too. So what can you tell us? Like, I want to know, like, the situations that Jackson Dart was put in that may be uncomfortable for him. That was a storyline throughout spring hey, we're trying to do that. Have you gotten a sense from players, coaches, or himself on how he's handling, like, being put in those uncomfortable spots, or even just like digesting all the information that he's getting? Yeah,
well, that last part you asked, that was one of the things Daboll highlighted. That he said he was like really exceptional at throwing a ton at him intentionally to see how much he can retain, and it seems like he's been pleased with that. Obviously, that's something that we're not really privy to what's going on in the meeting rooms and the installs, but it seems like he's checked that box for Daboll. Early in the spring, it was a lot of like musical chairs with the quarterback reps. It'd be like Russ would be out there for 3 reps of a 4-rep period, and then they put Dart in for 1. And then the next time, Russ would get 2, Jameis would get 1, Dart would get 1. Like, they were doing a lot of that, and that was annoying, candidly, to keep track of, because like, wait, who's in? And oh wait, the Dart's still in, but Dart's in. So that was like keeping your head on a swivel. But they kind of scaled that back as we got deeper into the spring, and I expect that probably be the case in training camp. Like, Russell Wilson is the guy they need to be ready to start week one. They need him to win as many games as possible this year. And listen, in their ideal world, Jackson Dart holds a clipboard all year and he starts week 18 when they're already locked up the number one seed. Something like a Patrick Mahomes situation. That's the ideal scenario. I think we all know that's probably not realistic. But I still think that'll be the approach in camp where like Russ is the unquestioned number one. I do think they'll do the thing Daboll likes to refer to, like just throw Dart in there. Like you don't even tell him in the morning, like, hey, you're gonna get 4 reps with the ones. It's just like, oh, Russ is out, Dart's in, like just to keep him on his toes. I thought Daboll had a good answer about that, where he's like, I like to put him with the ones at times because then he has to kind of like raise his level because Wandale and Darius Slayton, they know this offense like the back of their hand, so he has to go in there and command that. And I like to put him with the threes because then he has to tell all the undrafted rookies like, no, on this route you're doing this and that. So I think that was a cool insight into how Daboll views the mental part of it. But as far as like the on the field stuff, I mean, I think he looked like a rookie quarterback. Like, I mean, because coming in, it wasn't like this guy is a freak. Like he's Josh Allen. He's gonna be throwing the ball over the field. And it's gonna be like unbelievable to watch him every day. I mean, I think there's some obvious physical talent. I think he moves really well. But you just look at him on the field. He's not like this towering, physically imposing figure. I think he's pretty solidly built, but he's not very tall. He's got some mobility, but not like blazingly fast. So you're just kind of watching it from a narrow scope there, where it's like, all right, we're just gonna watch how he throws the ball, basically. I mean, there's times where he held the ball too long, totally understandable and expected with a rookie quarterback. Where whether that's because he didn't have a full mastery of what the offensive play was, or the defense did something. Well, shit, I've never seen that before. I think you're gonna see a lot of that probably in camp as well. And then I'm sure Daboll will want Bowen to throw some exotic looks at him just to challenge him. And, it kind of gives you teaching material. You go back to the room. It's like, oh, yeah, well, this is what they do in the NFL. The safety will drop down here. You don't see that in college. And I think Dart made a point, and I think you heard this from a lot of rookie quarterbacks. What the spring was about for him, the biggest adjustment was learning, what throws you can get away with, what throws you can't. Now, listen, he played in the SEC, but like maybe the number 2 corner at Auburn wasn't going to break on that, that kind of lazy out route you threw in here.
And Lane Kiffin's offense allowed you to get away with a lot of stuff too. And
you just can't get away with it. Like guys like Dane Belton, who has been kind of like a jag here, is going to make you pay if you're a step late or if you tip something off your eye. So I think he's learned that the hard way, but that's fine. Like that's why it's so crazy. Even to digress for a second, we're reviewing practices in the spring, we're giving stats because people want them, but it's like it might be a good thing that Jackson Dart threw 2 picks on the last practice of minicamp, because he goes into the summer, it's like, oh, okay, I can't throw that one late, or that pass on the sideline, it has to be over the outside shoulder. And it's like kind of just basic life stuff. The only way to learn is by going through it, making mistakes a lot of times, and now the next time you're better for it. But then you just tweet out what happened. Everyone's like, oh, he had 2 picks, he sucks, or oh, he had 2 picks, you're just highlighting the negatives. So it's like it kind of ties our hands, because it's gonna be an overreaction to whatever a rookie first round quarterback does. So I'll reserve any like major proclamations. I don't think he came in and looked like a disaster. I don't think he came in and looked like, okay, they got their week 1 starter, forget, rip up the plan, forget Russ, I think it's going to be a developmental process. I think camp will be, it's still camp, but it'll be a much better gauge, because you're going to see him day after day after day, and you hope to see progress. Again, we've seen him like a day here, a day there. It's a little harder to kind of track the progression he's making.
Yeah. Dan, I am praying that seeing Jackson Dart in football that matters happens later rather than sooner. Like it's development. Like the number 1 overall pick in the draft, there were questions around him. Now I think the process later in the process, people fell in love with Cam Ward as a creator outside the pocket, but then he also created within the pocket, and then there was that clear divide between Cam Ward and then everybody else. But even like the number 1 overall pick had question marks, and when you compare it to the 6 QBs that were taken in the year prior within the top 12 or top 15, like there was even question marks when you compare it to that. So Jackson Dart's a 22nd overall pick in a league that is dying for quarterbacks, right? Like developmental process is the word for me, and there's going to be pressure to play him. There's going to be pressure to get him in there. But even a point that you had, even pivoting away from that, you talked about, hey, well, throwing 2 picks in a practice may not be the worst thing. That brought me back to Brian Daboll in year 1. Brian Daboll in year 1 in training camp is saying, yeah, well, if we make some mistakes, it'll be all right. We're trying to be aggressive. We're trying to do what we do. And I'm like, all right, hell yeah. Like, it'll go back to a little bit of shades of 2019 Daniel Jones. And then he comes in and we have an interception rate of 1%. And it's like, all right, well, it's like the best in the league, and we're taking care of the ball, and we're being efficient. Well, it's like, well, that's not really what I thought we were going to get. So I going back to shades of that, and I hope Daboll embraces that, and I think he will with Jackson Dart. I think all three of these guys will embrace that. Hey, even if we make a mistake, it's going to be in the name of being aggressive and trying to score points and trying to get big plays and just do a better job of having a healthier offense. So
Daboll said that every time he talks about Dart, one of the things he highlights is, he's not afraid to,
willingness,
take shots. He's aggressive. And even, I think a lot of times over the past 3 years, it felt like veiled shots at Daniel Jones sometimes when he'd be like, hey, Tommy's not afraid to let it rip, or, Tyrod or whoever, like when he would do those kind of comments, like, well, the guy who usually starts for you doesn't do that. So it seemed like it wasn't an accident. But yeah, no, I think that's a big part of it, where you look at, it was obviously a very intentional way they built this quarterback room, not just in terms of experience and who's going to start, but also play style. Like, if nothing else, they're going to get the most out of these wide receivers because they got, the two veterans they brought in. The one thing they're willing to do is chuck it down the field. So if nothing else, that should help Malik Nabers, Darius Slayton, Jalin Hyatt skill sets. And then again, listen, if Jackson Dart blows them away, again, go back to the good problem they have. We're talking about the pass rush, and he forces your hand. You have to start him week 1, week 2, week 3, whatever. That's great. But they built this thing a very specific way. We have Russell Wilson here. They need to still win some games this year. You hope he is able to do that. And then you still kind of have Jameis in that limbo where it's like if Russ gets hurt or like it's a disaster, you still can go to Jameis if you don't think Dart's ready. So I don't think that anything should speed up the timeline with Dart other than his readiness. Like, I don't think I don't think you'll see a 5-4 Kurt Warner out, Eli in. Like, I don't think you'll see that with Russ and Dart. I think it'll be 2-8 and then Dart comes in, or Dart, if he's coming in before then, it's because he just looks so great and so far ahead of schedule.
Yeah, and I hope we don't get there because you're 2-8 and then you're talking about, well, the forget just the quarterback. The team may not be that good, right. And then you're putting in a quarterback that will probably be raw in a 2-8 situation, and it may get better, but it may also get worse. If this is like just a 1-sentence, 2-sentence answer, don't sweat it because there's so much to watch and try and keep track of during practices. But knowing you may take an entire practice just to look at one thing, and I know you've done that in the past. Have you been able to track how Brian Daboll communicates with Dart? How often he communicates with Darts? Like, let's just say as he comes off the field, is Brian Daboll the main person that Jackson Dart is talking to on the practice field? Shea Tierney, Mike Kafka. So, like, have you been able to pick up on the dynamic of that yet?
All right, yeah, so you alluded to I've spent full practice doing that. So, like, spoiler/tease, I'm sure that'll be coming at some point in camp. I'll just watch Dart exclusively for entire practice. I like to do that once in a while. I don't do it in the spring because you're only there so infrequently. Just it won't be a 1 to 2 sentence answer as we're going like on an hour here. That I'm probably not capable of that. Your lights turned off. That's how long we've been going here.
Yeah. You would think a podcast studio wouldn't have a timer that would go off after 40 minutes, but
anyways, so Kafka was the play caller, so he's kind of off to the side with his walkie-talkie, and so that meant Daboll was positioned, directly behind the offense, or even at times like right up against the huddle, and so he's got some input even live, like in between plays probably, but then certainly after every set of reps, so the ones come out, the twos go in, he's talking to that quarterback who just came off. So whether that is Dart coming off and Daboll having an extended conversation with him, or if, let's say, Russ comes off, Jameis is in, then Daboll might be talking to Dart and Russ. So there's a lot of hands-on from Daboll. I mean, of course, Shea Tierney, he's the guy who's with him station to station in practice. When they do individual periods, it's not as if Daboll is always with the quarterbacks. Like, he still makes his rounds, but certainly he spends a good amount of time with the quarterbacks and a ton of time with the offense in general. Anytime there's kind of like an offense-only install, Daboll's with them. And again, a lot of hands-on time with the quarterback. So yeah, I think that'll be something to probably track even more closely in camp. But yeah, for sure, anecdotally, every time Dart would come off, there was a lot of times where Daboll would be right in his ear. And again, even during reps or in between reps, it's like encouragement or like a quick question or a quick comment. So yes, I think that they're very much going to be tied to the hip. And I think maybe when you talk about the whole play calling decision, maybe this is a good thing because Daboll's freed up to do this because he's not in the walkie-talkie calling, the next play. He's able to just spend a little more, intentional time with Dart because Kafka's been doing that. Daboll's got his eyes on everything else, but he's able to focus a little more specifically on Dart.
We mentioned and we talked about how, national people, Daniel Jeremiah is saying that, with Jackson Dart, maybe we see him even by week 7. So I was on vacation this past week and, just thinking of things that maybe normally you wouldn't think about. And you see, like, this is not verified by anybody, but I think it's just like fan accounts saying, "Oh, the Saints need a quarterback," and there's Jameis Winston there, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I think Jameis's role is valuable for the Giants. I think he serves as a very good buffer, so you don't have to see Jackson Dart in the case of a Russell Wilson injury early on. But I really don't think, like, you know, if we get to that 2-8 scenario, you're not seeing Jameis Winston, you're seeing Jackson Dart. So there's part of my brain that says, well, maybe Jameis Winston is a little bit expendable. The New Orleans Saints come calling, and they need a quarterback bad, right? Third or a fourth round pick for Jameis Winston. Do you pull the trigger on that?
Me, 100%. I mean, third or fourth round pick, absolutely.
Especially for the Saints, if it's going to be an early one.
Not even a question. I mean, I think if we dial it back, like, does Joe Shane, and let's be honest, probably more like a 6th round pick. I mean, the Saints.
No way for 6th. You know, that's where you get like, no. You know,
the Saints I think the Saints, I don't know if they've officially come out. There's been reports that they're not really interested because there's been a little groundswell because he was liked down there. Maybe one Cam Jordan, I think, kind of campaigned to get him down there, and that kind of got dismissed. So I think they're willing to roll with that young kind of, you know, ugly collection of quarterbacks, and I think they might be willing to just take their medicine this year. So I'm not sure that even they'd be interested in training for Jameis. I think maybe the thing with Jameis that becomes more realistic is if a starter gets hurt and a team that's, you know, contending. But we always talk about that very rarely. I'm sure someone will come up with like 10 off the top of their head, but I'm trying to think, how often does that really happen? That a team trades for a backup in season, he comes in and, like, you know, solidifies a contender. Again, I'm sure there's examples. I can't.
Dobbs was the closest one, but then he was
a weird thing. Yeah, but yeah, that
didn't even make him a contender.
And so, like, if I don't know, let's just throw at a team. Like, if Brock Purdy gets hurt, are the 49ers really, like, are they going to look at Jameis Winston as the guy that, like, will go get, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I don't know if Jameis even fits that bill. So listen, if a team comes with a 3rd round pick, yes, absolutely. But if it's like a 6th round pick, because the one thing I think about is Jameis was signed to a 2-year deal. If he was on a 1-year deal, then yeah, I trade him tomorrow. I don't care what you're going to get from him, because yes, I'll say I'm going to ride with Russell, and then whenever the time is, we're obviously skipping over Jameis. But the fact that Jameis signed a 2-year deal, now you have a baked in solid backup on a cheap contract for next year. When we know Russ is going to be gone, but so you have Jackson Dart, you want a veteran backup, again, a pretty affordable price tag. And then also, I mean, they made that signing at the time where they didn't know they were going to get a quarterback, or they didn't know how the quarterback would progress. Like, let's just say Jackson Dart, you know, whatever little glimmers of hope we've seen this spring, he's not ready, or, you know, he gets hurt, whatever it may be. You have Jameis there as even a stopgap starter next year. So I think that there's value in Jameis almost more in 2026 than 25. So for a, you know, a late day 3 pick, I don't think they would do it, because I think that's sort of their view is like, yeah, Jameis has some value now, but almost more next year, where he'd be the number 2 guy to Jackson Dart. But again, if someone knocks your socks off, sure, you go ahead and pull the trigger. But I don't see it materializing. And again, the fact that the Saints don't seem interested, I'm having a tough time even finding who would be the suitor, again, you know, barring an injury. And then I still don't know that Jameis would be at the top of team's wish list.
Right. All right, last one for you. Any surprises? Who should we look out for in camp? Like Dalen Cambray, like, coming as a special teamer, but anytime you see a highlight with the backups, there's a number 5 wide receiver making some nice plays. Bo Collins from wide receiver. You know, it's easy for these UDFAs to kind of stick out, especially as receivers. But do you have anybody, like, on your radar right now that's UDFAs or bottom of the roster? The crazy thing is that in past years, I feel like this list may be a lot longer, but this is a Joe Shane roster, and a lot of spots are already kind of filled up. They may not have great or awesome names, but it's a Joe Shane roster that is kind of mostly completed for the most part.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. As I was trying to run through the positions and run through names, it's like, no, it's because it does feel as settled as the roster has been. I mean, honestly, without the cornerback competition, which I didn't really foresee, there wouldn't be really even any spots up for grab of much intrigue. Again, we can say right guard, but there's no real indication that, you know, Greg Van Roten won't be the starter until we get into camp. Maybe that'll become more legit. But yeah, obviously they returned the same 10 starters on offense from last year, except for quarterback, and we know what the quarterback's going to be. And then defensively, you know, they went out and made big additions. So those guys obviously are coming in as starters, and the other guys are returning. So yeah, there isn't like that uncertainty. Whereas, you know, as you mentioned earlier, this is a Joe Shane roster, because in earlier years there might have been guys who you assumed were like incumbents, but they weren't Joe Shane guys, and they might have got pushed out the door a little faster than than you expected. But yeah, now at this point, like, he's put this roster together. So yeah, I was gonna take the easy answer. It probably would be the UDFA wide receivers, and again, they got opportunities, especially in minicamp because you had no Nabers and Jalin Hyatt. So guys like Cambray, however you pronounce it, and Bo Collins, them getting reps are the ones kind of speaks volumes because there still are guys who are more experienced. They could have used Lil Jordan Humphrey with the ones. They could have used Amir Smith-Marset. Like, not that those guys are world beaters, but they're vets. So it was interesting to me that they, almost like I think it was more like maybe an extended audition to these young guys. Yeah, let's give them some reps with the ones that worked hard. They've shown promise. I don't think that means that those guys are going to, jump over guys on the depth chart. We already talked about how the wide receiver depth chart is pretty established up top, and then even Hyatt at 4. So best case, you're probably talking about number 5, and that's where it does come into special teams. And that's why I think Cambray is probably like a dark horse guy because he's not competing for reps on the first team offense. He's competing with Bryce Ford Wheaton to be the wide receiver specialist. And now, listen, I mean, he has a great track record, Cambray does, in college of being a great special teamer. But like Bryce Ford Wheaton is like a physical specimen, and he's done in the NFL, so that's still gonna be an uphill climb, which is funny. Like we're getting deep in the weeds here. Now we're talking about Dylan Cambray versus Bryce Ford Wheaton for a position, but like that's the type of stuff you really break down. But yeah, so that's all it really was in the spring. Like I would say Cambray was the surprise of the spring because again, the guy had 10 catches at Louisiana in like a 5-year college career. Like it's remarkable he even made the NFL. And it's funny. I mean, I do a story every year on the undrafted free agents, and he was great to talk to. I mean, these guys definitely going to be a coach, but he didn't even get a signing bonus. Like I think the Panthers wanted him to come in as a tryout. The Giants called and they wanted him as a tryout, and he's like, "Oh, we already committed to the Panthers." Like, "Well, how about we sign you?" But they didn't even give him any money. They just like, "Well, at least give you like a contract." He spot on the 90-man roster, so that was better than going and trying out. So that's how kind of like uncoveted he was, 2 months ago, a month ago, and now all of a sudden you fast forward and he's catching passes from Russell Wilson in OTA. So that's pretty cool. So that was a good story in the spring, but yeah, sometimes these things kind of peter out. Again, I just, one thing I've come to learn, the spring, I wouldn't say it's meaningless, but I think the summer is so much more revealing because it's just something about the repetitiveness of being there every day, and it's a grind, and it's much more physically taxing again because you got the full pads on. Even at wide receiver, it's just more physical. And I think that kind of the cream rises to the top a lot. Yeah. You have a lot of spring stars are forgotten by the second preseason game, and a lot of maybe vets who you're like, oh, that guy, it's someone's going to take his job, and then you remember, well, there's a reason why X player has been in the NFL for 6-7 years because they just kind of have an ability to perform consistently.
You got anything on tap for the next 5 weeks, or are we plugging out until we're on for the next couple months?
Yeah, no, I'm checking out, man. It's like I didn't even realize that the Giants somehow screwed us and gave us an extra long spring. Every other team was breaking for summer.
Yeah,
the previous week. I'm not sure what happened there. I didn't notice it when
Aaron Rodgers signed a whole week before they were done, and it's like, all right, well, that's so funny. By the way, it's like, oh, why? Of course, this happened. They probably broke practice. Like, and then he's like, all right, I'm ready now.
Yeah,
like, all right.
Yeah. But now everyone was doing like mini camp takeaways. I'm like, wait, we haven't even started mini camp. So yeah, so no, it's a little condensed, but yeah, no, just unplugging. Looking forward to just taking this break, and then it's like kind of full speed ahead. You know how it goes with camp, where it's a grind, it's a fun grind. So yeah, I'm looking forward to recharging the battery and then hitting the ground running when we get back in late July.
All right, I'll see you when I'm sitting in that I will say, I love sitting in the shade. Do you ever want to become a media member? Nope. They gotta stand out in the sun and they gotta. I'm sitting in the shade and I'm sprinting out and everybody else is on the field sweating. So I'll see you when you're on the field sweating. And I'll be in the shade and I'll wave to you and I'll say hello and we'll catch up. So Dan Duggan, thank you so much and appreciate you as always.
Yeah, likewise, appreciate you.
All right, thanks to Dan Duggan. Appreciate him. Hope he enjoys his vacation because, yeah, man, in a couple of weeks, five or so weeks. Training camp's going to start, and we're locking back in for Giants. We're locking back in for football, and I have a good feeling about this year. I have a good feeling about this year for our football team. I have a good feeling this year for I think the game of football is in a pretty good spot right now with the quarterbacks that are in the league right now. I think we're going to see some entertaining stuff, and I'm excited this year from a content perspective, and I'm working on some things for JM Football, some different stuff, and I want to go. I want to go, and I'm really excited about it. And that's really spending a lot of time now, while we're in the slow time, to front load stuff, to work on some different stuff, and So every single day of the week, whether it's Talking Giants or JM Football, I got stuff coming out, and I'm really excited about it. And I hope you're excited about it too, because we're gonna win some more games this year, and it's gonna be a shit ton of fun. So, I also was on WFAN this past weekend. I didn't even get a chance to really like promo it because the service was so bad at Fanatics Fest. So thank you to Sean Morash and thank you to Tommy Lugar. I kind of sent like a wise ass text message to Sean because it's like he was going to be at Fanatics Fest hosting a show on 101.9 and on WFAN, and I send him a wise ass text message like, "Hey, I'm going to be there, man. Like, I'm going to come on, right?" And I'm thinking like he's going to be like, "Oh no, man, we got this person on, we got that person on." He's like, "Yeah, I would love it. We don't even fully have anything mapped out yet." So, I had a lot of fun. Talked Giants football for about 15 minutes with them at around noon. I have it recorded. I may post it at some time, or why should I not post it? So, but I had a lot of fun. It was the first time that I didn't just call into WFAN because we've called in before. Was just on air with the guys, and it was pretty cool. So I appreciate those guys, and I appreciate all of you. So, I'll see you next week. I think next week either gonna do a 53-man roster prediction show or a camp battle show. Those are still two shows that I haven't done yet. May have a guest, may do it solo. You'll see. We'll see you next week. And until then, take it away, Joey.
It starts today. Let's go Giants! We bleed blue!